Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Weekend Review for June 29, 2025. Today, we're talking with Ms. Dziunik Aghajanian, a diplomat and former ambassador of Armenia to many countries.
Before we begin, folks, you may have been tracking what's going on in Armenia, and I just have a fun fact for you. If you say something like, "We will intervene in our own way," that is now grounds for arrest. You can just ask Samvel Karapetyan. That was enough to get him arrested and sentenced to 2 months pretrial detention. He is the richest Armenian in the world, or one of the richest. It was just a vague sentence, and suddenly it's sedition. And it is, I think, in times like this, that it's important to remember that independent voices matter more than ever. They're getting fewer and far in between as the government increases its crackdown. And I just want to mention, I won't be gloating, but maybe I am, that Groong is the only comprehensive and independent English language podcast focused on Armenia and its region. Go ahead and check. We'll wait, but I don't think there's anything like us.
There's no government money. There's no NGO money. There's nothing like that supports us.
Yeah, no alphabet soup money, definitely. And it takes a tremendous amount of effort to produce and edit and so forth, and you see the results in front of you. So if you want to help, please make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and comment, like, and share this episode with everyone that you know, because that really helps us amplify the message. And if you're feeling generous, also you consider supporting us at podcasts.groong.org/donate. That'll help fuel our coverage on what matters in our own way. All right, on to the show.
Ambassador Aghajanian, welcome back to the Groong podcast.
Good evening, thank you.
Ողջույն, Dziunik-jan.
Ողջույն.
Dziunik, we've covered Israel's US-backed unprovoked assault on Iran. Since last week's ceasefire, which appears to be holding for now, Iran has begun burying its dead. Military commanders, scientists, nuclear negotiators, and their families, their children, their babies, many of whom were killed in their sleep during the targeted assassinations by Israel when the war began. Can you, in your own words, reflect on what transpired, and how confident are you if the ceasefire will hold or not?
Well, first of all, I would like to mention that the ceasefire is very fragile and, according to me, very temporary. And for the Israeli shock attack, I think they were trying, according to their calculations, to bring to the knees Iran and its population by taking the main weaponry out of the anti-missile systems out of the operation, and instigating internal violence and riots and instability, which would have forced the Iranian government to actually give in to the demands that were coming from the US side. The thing is that Iranians were well aware that this kind of an attack was in preparation. And let's remember that the National Security Advisor for Trump was actually sacked because of certain clandestine discussions with Netanyahu and his administration over a military option for bringing Iran down to their demands. But in effect, Trump did not want to go that path, and he actually tried to use an alternative way of dealing with Iran, but the kind of demands that they put in front of Iran in the so-called negotiations, because that was not negotiations, were totally unacceptable, and they were against the NPT treaty and the international law in that respect. So you cannot just ask a country to give in their missile defense systems because you don't like it. I'm sorry, that's not the case how international order works. But I think the hawks in Trump administration gained apparently upper hand, and Trump gave the opportunity to use that option with the hope that if that works, it's fine. If it doesn't work, then he will use his own way of kind of becoming the peace pigeon that will bring the two parties together. And we saw that actually it didn't work. The calculations were wrong. It was a total miscalculation, the way we have seen in Iraq, the way we have seen vis-a-vis Russia. And I think that Trump was forced to act in order not to allow for total destruction of Israel, which would have been devastating for the American interest in the region, and also to kind of become this hero that used force to bring peace, the way he is taking his policy as the main characterization for his approach in his foreign policy making. So I think that was it. Iran knew what was coming, did everything to safeguard the most important assets, and the unity in the public showed that that kind of approach is not going to work with vis-a-vis Iran. So we will see what is happening. I don't think this situation will last long. Again, they are trying to force Iran to a negotiation table, but if before that Iran was working very sincerely with IAEA, and its experts were all over the country checking the facilities. But I guess they were passing on the information to Israel and apparently to US.
Yeah.
Through US to also Israel, which means leaking national related information to an enemy. We have seen that in the way OIC was working in Ukraine, in Donbas area, that they were just passing all the information to the Ukrainian government and even giving the target details so that they can attack these facilities in Donbas. So it's the same situation, and we have seen that with the hollow trust in Nagorno-Karabakh. So it's handwriting. It's a pattern that we see repeatedly over and over again. And it's understandable that Iran does not want any kind of spies around his own facilities, knowing that very precious scientists and professionals are being sacrificed to some countries.
Yeah, I understand that they're not going to
demands.
allow IAEA to make any inspections anymore.
No,
and they're not signing the NPT unless Israel signs it. So it's going to be
they are member of
two-way
NPT,
street.
but they will stop temporarily their membership in a way. But they stopped their membership, or at least the parliament passed a decision not to cooperate with IAEA, to stop cooperation with IAEA, unless Israel becomes a member and allows full IAEA verification system working in Israel, which I don't think will happen in the nearest future.
Ambassador, the U.S.-Israeli war highlighted serious issues between Iran and Azerbaijan. It has become increasingly clear that Azerbaijan is allowing Israel to use the territories it captured from Artsakh and ethnically cleansed of its Armenian population for operations against Iran. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian appealed to Ilham Aliyev just a few days ago to investigate the use of Azeri airspace by Israeli drones and aircraft in attacking Iran. And the Azerbaijani Ministry of Foreign Affairs immediately came back, vehemently rejecting the claims as pro-Armenian, baseless, provocative, and so on. They've actually started a very brutal anti-Iranian campaign on state TV in Azerbaijan. Everybody knows that these drones were coming from Azerbaijan. Where is this going to lead Iran and Azerbaijan relations?
But it's going to complicate the relations, definitely, but that was expectable. And I think in our interviews, I have also mentioned that the areas occupied by Azerbaijan of the Artsakh Republic have, from the first day, have been used as platform, as a launch ground for future Azerbaijani attacks against Iran, which is part of the whole scheme, for which Artsakh was actually given as a bonus to Azerbaijan. And definitely Israelis have put their intelligence systems and have been working there. And even during the crash of the Iranian president, his helicopter, there were a lot of talk that they might have somehow got into the flight radar systems and created a situation that brought to the crash of the helicopter.
This is President Raisi.
Yes, President Raisi and Foreign Minister Abdullahian that was accompanying him. So this is something that we have to be very aware of. This whole area was initially designed to be used against Iran in the whole attack that Israel was preparing. That's why even during his war with Palestinians in Gaza, he was supplying constantly, relentlessly Azerbaijan with weaponry. So this is still in place. The plan is still in place. It's simply that Iranians are becoming more and more vocal about the usage of the Azerbaijani occupied territories of Artsakh against Iran and Iranian interests.
So how long is Iran going to tolerate this? Because these were the bases. These were the bases from where the drones flew straight to Tehran and had carried out assassinations in buildings. People like nuclear scientists, negotiators, politicians, innocent families were killed overnight.
Well, we have to be aware that Iran right now cannot go into very open action against Azerbaijan, because that would mean opening up a second front, which is not beneficial for Iran. And Israel is waiting for that occasion. And that's something that is very dangerous for us as well, because Armenia will be used for that purpose. As I have described in several of my interviews, the whole plan, how they are going to use Armenia as the trigger point for the second front against Iran and Russia. And in fact, the same way of thinking is still in place, and I'm afraid will be utilized very soon, sometimes maybe end of July, August period, which is becoming more and more dangerous as I see the whole development going. So Iran, the way Iran reacted, the president's telephone conversation with Pezeshkian's conversation with Aliyev shows that in a very Eastern way, that we are aware and we know what is going. So don't go further, then we will have to act. I think that was a kind of a warning sign to Aliyev in a very diplomatic Iranian way of showing that they know what Azeris are doing, and they are very disappointed at that kind of a behavior of Azerbaijan, and the consequences will be very bad for the whole region and for Azerbaijan as well.
Yeah, so I have bad news for all those who keep claiming that Russia is a good friend of Azerbaijan and is sort of scheming against Armenia with Azerbaijan, because recently tensions escalated again between Russia and Azerbaijan. Viewers may recall the dispute between Azerbaijan and Russia following the Azerbaijani Airlines crash in December 2024. If you want to get a reminder of that, you can go to episode 410. Back in February, we had Benjamin Pogosyan, and we talked in detail about that, and several episodes afterwards as well. Although at the time Aliyev ramped up the rhetoric to the point of to the brink, essentially, tensions eventually cooled, probably due to Russian cool-headed diplomacy. And fast forward now to June 27th, last week, and now tensions are back at a high point. when after the police in Yekaterinburg, Russia, raided an Azerbaijani criminal group, resulting into deaths. About 50 Azerbaijani-born Russian citizens were detained, and more than 10 apartments were searched. This was related to a murder that happened 24 years ago. But, it basically like an internal crime in Russia that did not stop the Azerbaijani Foreign Ministry from immediately condemning the operation as unacceptable violence. And Azerbaijan retaliated by raiding the Baku office of Russia's Sputnik news agency, detaining its staff and cutting its broadcast. Baku also canceled upcoming Russian cultural events and a planned parliamentary visit to Moscow. The Kremlin, in response, called Azerbaijan's response disproportionate, insisting the raids were routine law enforcement actions and warning of unspecified consequences. What's behind the sudden deterioration, Dziunik, in Russia-Azerbaijan relations? Was it always like brewing, or is this like a genuine rupture?
No, it's not a genuine rupture. We have to look at the situation in the overall geopolitical scheme that is being worked out in our region. As you remember, after the fall of Assad regime in Syria, Turkey was very eager to go on with the opening of the so-called Zangezur corridor and finishing up with the Turan project, which was to be continued later on. And they were planning actually to start the process sometimes in the beginning of February. And knowing that it would definitely entail problems with Russia, Aliyev used this plane crash to create a situation when he will not be blamed for the deterioration of the situation, and will actually, his anti-Russian stance and rhetoric would be understandable for his own public and also for the Europeans that are pushing for the plan to go forward. However, the Trump administration's stance in the beginning of his coming to power did not allow these plans to go forward, and they pushed it backward. Time-wise, they pushed it backward. So now, after Pashinyan's visit to Istanbul, I think they are trying to revive this situation. And that's the reason why we see this kind of a very aggressive reaction to a mafia-related situation in Russia. And we know that many Azerbaijani groups are involved in criminal activities there also. I will not be surprised that in the future we see a lot of cells that were used by Turkey through Azerbaijani diaspora to destabilize Russia internally are revealed, and certain members of those groups are arrested. So I don't think this is only related to this 24-year-ago murder. This is more related to this whole system that is being used through Azerbaijani diaspora in Russia with regard to this Turan project and destabilization of Russia through its internal terrorist cells, part of which we saw, these terrorist cells, part of which we saw in Crocus City Hall actions. And I think this kind of situation is being cooked in the minds of these Western centers that are trying to bring Russia down and gain some upper hand in Russia-Ukraine situation. So we will see this whole thing working together. The Azerbaijani reaction simply speaks about the very hard pressure from the Western centers over Aliyev to satisfy and to act according to his own commitments. I think we're getting closer to the last chapter of this whole scheme. I hope it will not be successful and it will fail, But we have to be very careful because this kind of action and reaction from the Azerbaijani side shows that they are working through this scheme, and also the repressive actions of our so-called prime minister in Armenia go along with this whole scenario.
Yeah, and as we frequently like to point out, for the last 5 years, Azerbaijan has been armed to the teeth with probably hundreds of plane loads of weapons from Israel, and with that you could conquer Armenia 100 times over. So it's clear that those weapons are planning, would be used against someone other much bigger than Armenia. And
Definitely.
Turkey has also been very active in supplying Azerbaijan recently, and they have been doing constant joint military drills as if they're preparing for World War III. So, we like to point that out, and those are not just going to be used against Armenia. I mean, Armenia is just,
No,
unfortunately, right
Armenia will
now,
be only the trigger point for those actions.
yeah.
And given the stance of our current government that is simply appeasing all the demands coming from the Turkish and the Azerbaijani side, it means that they are working in sync with these people in implementing the plan that was put forward when he was brought to power.
Let's talk just a little bit about Russian and Armenian relations. Leading into this weekend, there was a summit of the Eurasian Economic Union in Minsk. Pashinyan attended by Zoom because he doesn't show his face in Minsk. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Overchuk stated that as Armenia continues to set EU standards on its food imports, it's causing barriers to trade within the EAEU. And Russia is going to consider economic measures to counteract this. He didn't specify exactly what measures, but he was clear in messaging. Is Armenia ready to risk damaging its economy when a lion's share of its foreign trade relies on Russia?
Well, for Armenia, I would say no, but for the current Armenian government, yes. And they're working, as I said, according to the commitments under which they have been brought to power, which means putting Armenia totally under the Western umbrella. It means becoming part of the EU, bringing NATO forces to Armenia, taking the Russian base out. Actually, this is the ultimate picture that is being depicted, but in practice, it will mean putting Armenia under Turkish influence and under Turkish control, be it Turkey through Azerbaijan or Turkey itself. So this is the whole point. And Armenia, on one side, says, "Oh no, Eurasian Economic Union is very beneficial for us. We're doing nothing about that. At one point, we will decide which way we are going." But as far as the Collective Security Treaty Organization is considered, we have frozen our membership, and we're not going to do anything unless the CSTO speaks loudly about territorial integrity of Armenia, exactly pinpointing our borders, which even the current government has put under question by its own actions and by its own decisions. So this means one thing, that the former understanding of Armenia being forced into the Western camp, I would put it that way, is in progress. It's being carried out step by step. Meantime, because economically, as you mentioned, the lion's share of our economy and profits come from the Eurasian Economic Union member states, especially Russia. They cannot allow themselves to cut it immediately. So they are putting in place requirements and demands that are creating barriers for the economic trade. And then the thing is that the people in Armenia, the business people in Armenia, are not being informed about these decisions, and they are being put into a situation when Russian control agencies are creating problems at the trust points, and then Russia is being blamed for the losses that Armenian business people are facing as a result of these actions. So this is again in line with depicting Russia as the main evil, the anti-Russian sentiment being raised in Armenia. Now they're trying to show that even for the economic part, we cannot rely on Russia and it's not a trustworthy partner. That's why we are seeing problems with our brandy crossing the Russian border, the apricot crossing the Russian border, even Georgia creating problems for the
So, Ambassador, can you
trucks.
say a little bit more about that? Are those problems, because that was a question we were going to ask you, are those problems with the brandy export are actually created by Georgia, or are they coming from Russia trickling over through Georgia? What is the problem there, and are they
No,
being
the problems
resolved?
come from Georgia, and Georgia is stopping the trucks and demanding tests of the brandy before it crosses its own territory to Russia, which is against the rules because this brandy is not intended for Georgia. Georgia is only a transit point, transit country in this case, and the endpoint consumer is in Russia. So they are creating problems for the fruits and vegetables, knowing that they are very fragile and within several days
The most recent case being apricots right now.
Yeah, and apricots, you know how fragile they are. If you
Mm-hmm.
keep them for a day or two, even in the best conditions, they lose their quality and become useless. So they are creating problems for our trucks crossing through Georgia. And I have heard, I don't know how correct this information is, that even our customs services are creating problems for our trucks crossing to Georgia. They are saying that as if they try to safeguard our business people from wasting money in Georgia while waiting at the checkpoint. But I think it's more to that than we see now. Also, the farmers are not being helped with the harvest and with the consumption of the produce that they have raised, and they're facing losses and losses and losses with every passing day.
Do you think these are driven by tariff demands, some kind of profit sharing on the part of Georgia? I mean, why else would they be stopping these
I don't
exports?
know. I know that Turkey has a big role in Georgia. That it has instilled its hands and face and feet into the Georgian economy, and I know how much they are being pressurized so that they would create difficulties for our economy. I know that this government has done everything to kill the areas in which Armenian production had an upper hand and had been considered to be better than either Azerbaijani or Turkish. So I think it's simply probably oriented towards killing our economy, bringing it down to the extent that they will justify the inflow of Turkish capital and then gaining or obtaining all Armenian production areas, so that the people will be forced to accept the Turkish rule over themselves. I would put it this way.
Dziunik, since May, Pashinyan and his wife or girlfriend or whatever have escalated attacks on the Armenian Church following the Catholicos' advocacy for Artsakh and the rights of Armenians of Artsakh at a conference in Bern. This sparked a crackdown that included the arrests now of Archbishop Bagrat Galstanyan, church patron Samuel Karapetyan, Artsakh Member of Parliament David Galstyan, and last week authorities targeted Archbishop Mikhail Aghajanian with these conjured up allegations that he's trying to call for state overthrow and they tried to arrest him actually at the church's annual assembly of the clergy. Yes. He, of course, the people prevented that from happening, and then he later turned himself in nevertheless. His case was handled to a judge, Mas Ismailian, a known Pashinyan ally, repeatedly assigned to sensitive cases with predetermined outcomes, it seems. The system essentially that's supposed to have randomization of judges does not appear to be working when it comes to political cases. The investigative committee then quietly amended the charges because initially they were claiming that he said something last year in 2024, but
Yes.
1 hour after releasing the information about his demand for his arrest, they said now he said something bad on June 21st this year, which seems like this case is being constructed real time, as needed. Meanwhile, the state-controlled media and the fake news campaign was ramped up to the maximum. On Armenian public TV, suddenly this defrocked priest appeared, and he said all kinds of like false things about Catholicos Garagian II, or at least facts, so-called facts that if you just have a Google search engine, you can verify that are completely false. So is this a targeted campaign to intimidate and neutralize the Armenian Church as a political force? What's behind this recent outburst by Pashinyan?
Well, yes, it's a campaign to neutralize and to diminish the significance of the Armenian Church, but not for the political case or political stance, but for preservation of the Armenian identity and preservation and fight for the pursuance of the interests of the Armenian people, both in Armenia and in the whole world, including the rights of the Artsakhi Armenians and demands for their return to their homeland and dignified return to the homeland with international security guarantees. I think, this is not the first time. From the very first day the so-called prime minister came to power, a movement called New Armenian, New Catholicos was initiated, did not succeed then. Later on, the same person made several announcements about bringing the church down to the knees, which the church says that the clergy come down to the knees, but in front of God, not the different kind of position holders in different governments and in different countries. The only purpose this particular action follows is to simply kill the resistance in the Armenian people, to kill the resilience, the power of resilience coming from the church. You know that the church has been the front holder of the fight for the Armenian identity, for the Armenian culture, for the preservation of the nations throughout centuries. Even at the worst times, the clergy were the ones leading the people and the nation to come out from the tragic events as we saw in 1915, and they were also among those that were killed in percentage-wise most of all the other representatives. And they were targeted as the leaders of the nation. So now the same situation repeats because this person does not want any resistance against the promises, the implementation of the promises that he has made, which would result in new concessions and new losses for the Republic of Armenia and for the Armenian people in general. And that's why he wants to neutralize the church, or to put somebody who will be following his demands as the head of the church, but I have to simply state that it is some from the field of impossibility that he would like to have somebody there that will fulfill his demands, because the clergy in the Armenian Church know well what is coming, and they have gone through several phases of this same kind of situation. Even during the last century, we have seen the beginning of the 20th century and the genocide situation. We have seen the 1930s with the Stalin repressions. We have seen later on the situation with the clergy in Azerbaijan. And we will see, we are seeing it now regretfully in Armenia itself with the Armenian government. That's the saddest part, that whatever evil and whatever devastation is being brought to our people is brought by the hands of the government and administration that the people himself brought to power. That's the saddest thing that is happening. That's the tragedy of the situation.
I mean, just this language that Pashinyan is using against the Catholicos, unfortunately, the international media, which acted as a tabloid press in this case, they just copied his language, because he said some very vulgar things about the Catholicos. And in all these years, I don't believe even during the Artsakh War has Armenia received so much international news coverage as they received the coverage of Pashinyan using vulgarities against the Catholicos. But that's beside the point. Maybe actually that is the point. What do you think about the location and the timing of the arrest? Because I believe for the first time in the history of independent Armenia, masked men burst into the Holy See, Etchmiadzin, and tried to arrest an archbishop there. Even though it's a minor, I mean, in terms of offenses, it's something about speech, and his lawyers were arguing this is like a medium, at most, this is a medium level offense. They could have just demanded that he turn himself in, but they demonstrably bursted into Etchmiadzin to try to arrest him. Was the timing and the way they did this meant to send a message? Also, we should point out that the criminal case was opened, I think, around 10 days ago. So they waited 10 days, and then just when Archbishop Dziunik Aghajanian was chairing this session of the clergy, they decided to conduct this operation.
Well, there was no coincidence, and they were trying to get some kind of a show to probably send a message to Erdogan that he's still in power and he's still in control. But I think it didn't work out. Honestly, I don't care what international media is writing anymore, because they are just, they show their hypocrisy every time we see a violation of the so-called democratic values and rights, and we saw a total silence from them about the genocide elections by Azerbaijan in Artsakh, the ethnic cleansing of Armenians. And I don't think we have to pay any attention to that. The most important thing for me is the response of the population. And the population of Armenia responded in extremely negative terms. The prime minister's rating went even down to 7%, which is even beyond the so-called administrative percentage that is usually given as 10 to 15% of administrative resource. And it shows that the Armenian people has stepped into this recovery process, understanding what the plan is, why is it being implemented, what is being used, kind of separating the truth from the false, starting to understand that they are being manipulated to react in a way that the government wants in order to get some support ground for the future concessions that he will be making. I don't think the population is naive, in its majority, is naive anymore to give in to this kind of manipulations, and they have started to respond with the correct understanding of the exact picture and the player's role in this whole scheme that is being played, and Armenia is put in the middle of this whole devastating scheme. And that's the best part that I will take out from this situation. That is why people were in Holy Etchmiadzin. They supported Vehapar and supported Archbishop Mikhail Aghajanian. They supported Bagrat Sarpazan. And I think that I hope that we will not see any repetition of this kind of situation. And I think the resignation of the head of the National Security Service is also part of this whole recovery situation, because they understand now what the ultimate goal of this plan is, which in its entirety means non-existence of Armenia as an independent state.
Ambassador, in the middle of all these church attacks on the part of Pashinyan and his government, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, expressed strong support for Nicole Pashinyan, affirming, quote, French solidarity in response to attempts to destabilize Armenia's democracy. Those were his words. And he appears to be framing the entire issue as a external threat to democracy rather than a domestic political crackdown. In the same message, he also says that they express support for Pashinyan to continue talks with Azerbaijan and Turkey to open borders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To me, it sounded like this is almost like a quid pro quo, saying, continue with the talks and we will support you against your opposition. What are your thoughts?
Actually, I would decode his message as stamping his participation in the overall loss of Artsakh and the whole plan to give Artsakh as a bonus to Azerbaijan for the future actions. And part of the support that they give to the prime minister is with the understanding that he will continue with the commitments he has made. So this is the whole message. But I think they are missing one major point, and the recent visit of Kaja Kallas is also part of this thing. That whenever they speak in these terms, it shows the hypocrisy of the Europeans and the understanding in the people's mind of them being part of the plan to actually bring devastation to Armenia becomes more and more clear to many in the country. They are actually showing how insincere they are in their words of support whenever they try to present themselves as very supportive for the Armenian interest, for the Armenian cause or cases. The same goes with Macron. Macron, I call the whole situation that France, in the face of Macron, was put there as the godfather of the whole plan. And we saw that being implemented in Prague in 2022, when Pashinyan accepted Artsakh as part of Azerbaijan, because of the Armenian people's affiliation, very positive affiliation with France, and the French people actually, they misused the trust of our people towards this country that we consider to be very positively inclined or positively looking towards Armenia. Now we see the real picture. I fully understand that there are many French people that will not share his views, will not share his approaches. They will be against this kind of stance. But we, as people outside of Armenia discuss and understand the current Armenian politics from what the Armenian government is doing or the representative of Armenian government are showing or articulating. The same is with France and other countries. So we are looking at these countries from the perspective of their leaders and whatever they say about the situation in Armenia. And in this kind of a situation, when it is obvious to even to the blind person that this is an artificially created problem in the Armenian society, that this is something that has a underlying plan for totally unfriendly development for Armenia. And now we see that European countries or EU representatives are supporting this kind of a government. It shows that they are part and parcel of this plan.
Well, when he talks and frames things as an external threat to democracy, he's essentially implying that the church in opposition to the government or the opposition in opposition to the government are all being driven by, they're an external threat. Maybe they are puppets of third countries, and they often accuse these entities of being under the patronage of Russia. So essentially, is that the framing that Macron is implicitly making?
Well, I don't know about Macron implicitly making or not, but I know that the satellites from the government, different government representatives have written and have tried to put this idea forward. And you mentioned about this interview that they were trying to depict the Catholicos as an agent of the KGB. So this is not a secret that whatever they do, they try to depict it as something coming from Russia. But as I said, instead, in the Armenian public, they are losing any I would say even minor pieces of trust that are left in the country and in the society, and showing their total hypocrisy and their total dependence on the Turkish and Azerbaijani role in the plan that they have put in as part of the Turan project that is supposed to work against Russia and against Iran. So this is part of the whole geopolitical game, as I have mentioned in many times, of the attempts to keep their to hegemony in the world, to keep themselves as economic, political, and now they're trying to become a military center in the world, telling the rest of the countries in the world how to breathe, how to live, what to think, and how to behave. But I can assure you that at least in the Armenian public, with every single word coming out from this kind of people in support of the government, especially in this kind of situations when the Armenian public is clearly standing on the opposite side of this approach, is helping them to lose more and more the trust that they have ever had in the Armenian public. So this is the situation.
Can I just remind that the Armenian Church has always been at the forefront of Armenian identity. It's one of the cornerstones of Armenian identity. And the Armenian Church represents not just the Republic of Armenia, it represents a 10 million strong global Armenian population, which includes a huge, more than 2 million diasporan Armenians in Russia, equally as many, maybe, or in the same order of magnitude, diaspora in the United States. So it has to have a very careful balancing act. And what's happening is the Armenian government is trying to usurp control of this church. And for many, that's the last refuge. But what's interesting is that while Macron is, as a foreign leader, is weighing into this issue, he could have said this is an internal issue of Armenia, right, and not said anything. He weighed into this and painted it as an external attempt to destabilize Armenia's democracy, which is ludicrous. But here's another important aspect. Lavrov was also asked about the issue, and Lavrov said, this is an internal issue of Armenia. But of course, we're concerned about what's going on with the Armenian Church because we have a huge diaspora here in Russia. And that was enough to get Arat Mirzoyan off his, I don't know, start singing about,
Off his rocker.
yeah, to lecture Lavrov. He said, this is an internal matter. This is not an attack against the church, and Russia should never even try to intervene in internal issues of Armenia. So which is it? Is it like an external issue or is it an internal issue? Or does it matter? Does it depend on who's asking? I just couldn't avoid to, I just couldn't stop myself from making this commentary, but it is ridiculous that, this issue is being politicized this way by Pashinyan. Anyway, we have a lot to cover,
Well,
so
I
yeah.
think it is, we shouldn't forget when and where it was said, and that was said during the press conference with Kaja Kallas, and that was a way of Mirzoyan trying to show his European-oriented stance and belief that Armenia has to be in the European, they call it European family, whereas Armenia has always been in European family. It's just the European family has gone to I don't know where. As far as the foreign interference or their messaging about that, I think they want to refer more to Karapetyan, Samuel Karapetyan's issue rather than the church. But I think in the Armenian people, as I said, the best outcome of this situation is that there was one more layer of lies and manipulations scrapped over the minds of the Armenian population in Armenia, and their true understanding of the situation becomes more and more clear for the whole population. This is the best thing coming out of this very sad developments that we're seeing. But the danger and the risk that we have is the whole thing is being cooked in the face of coming developments, as if they are trying to demobilize the population, make them more powerless, so that there won't be any resistance, any criticism, any demonstration against what Pashinyan is preparing to give as part of the concessions that they have agreed both in during the Estonia's visit, during the Albania's visit, and the recent one in Istanbul.
So speaking of Kallas, she was in Armenia over the weekend. Kallas is the EU High Representative of Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. And one of the announcements that was made, was that Armenia is going to sign a security cooperation. To me, it seemed like a very, not very significant outcome. But one of the announcements was that Armenia and the EU plan to begin consultations on on defense and security cooperation between Armenia and the EU. I don't actually know what this means, but actually I do, because later in the press conference, Arat Mirzoyan clarified that this also includes combating false news or fake news or disinformation, as he phrased it, and this hybrid warfare. So it seems like, the EU is going to supply Armenia with tools to combat hybrid warfare, while many European countries are supplying Azerbaijan with deadly weapons that killed Armenians and most likely will continue to kill Armenians in the future. But I wanted to get your take on. Let me mention one more thing, because for all this talk about EU and Armenia security assistance, the most that the EU could muster to give to Armenia was a 10 million euro package last year, which was not lethal weapons, but a tent, essentially a hospital tent, that was worth $10 million. And the only way that could have been done was for the EU to also agree to provide reciprocal, equivalent aid to Azerbaijan, thanks to Hungary's insistence. And meanwhile, this year, the EU was proposing a 22 million euro aid to Armenia, which was blocked by Hungary, which said that if the EU is providing 22 million to Armenia, then it should also provide 22 million to Azerbaijan. Very short, we don't want to dwell on this, but what is your takeaway from the visit by Kallas? Besides this security assistance, what else can you say to us about this?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, that 10 million euros tent has not yet materialized, the same way as the 260 million euros promise after the 44-day war has not materialized. And the same, I think, fate will follow this 22 million. As for the combating the hybrid war, I think they are masters of false information creation and even cooking different kind of cases and putting people to jail by these artificial criminal cases. So I don't think this is the main purpose. It's just trying to show something as part of the advancement in the cooperation and knowing that security issue is very sensitive for the Armenian public. They are just saying words that will fall into the ears of the Armenians and probably satisfy some of these sensitivities. However, I don't think this is going to work either. As for her visit, she would have skipped the visit easily. It's just there was a lot of criticism during her visit to Baku. And if I'm not mistaken, it was on April 24, and you know what kind of a day
The day
it
after,
was.
yes.
Yeah.
And she didn't mention anything about when in Baku, she didn't mention anything about Artsakh, nothing about our hostages
ethnic
there.
cleansing, nothing about hostages, and this is the foreign affairs minister of the EU that is supposed to follow the human rights and democracy values of this particular body. As for the visit nowadays, she again visited Azerbaijan, so there will be no criticism from the Azerbaijani side. So they are kind of pampering Azerbaijan and pushing Aliyev to not stop in any way with the commitments, and they are hoping that this time Aliyev will not jump off the road when the time comes to act. But I have to actually mention that Aliyev with Erdogan, they are very smart in playing on the very sensitive nerves of these people. And when the time comes, they will try to get as much as they can without losing an inch, and they will just jump off the road when they see that will bring some kind of a devastation to their profits or their positions in their countries. We will have to wait and see, and it's not that long. I think in the coming 3 weeks, 1 month time, we will see new developments. As I said, whatever we see in the Russian-Azerbaijani tensions, in the Iranian-Israeli side, in the push for the so-called Gaza solution, which I don't think will work, and it's another way of putting the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians from Gaza in a digestible plateau, in a way, so that they can present it without being blamed for ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza. We will have to wait and see. I think we're coming very close to this very dangerous time. It's another stage that we have to pass, but I think we have to be very careful not to weaken our fight against this very dangerous plans that our government has signed to.
Dziunik, you have been a diplomat. You were in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so I want to ask you about this Istanbul Declaration that the Organization for Islamic Cooperation put out after their meeting June 21, 22, And that was, I believe, the day after that Pashinyan was in Istanbul, as a matter of fact. They declared solidarity with an extremely pro-Azeri statement. In fact, it was drafted by Azerbaijan and Turkey. They said things about supporting the so-called Western Azerbaijan community, et cetera, et cetera. We'll put all of the points that were in there in the show notes, so please go visit that. But then there was hardly any real response from the Armenian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They had a statement expressing deep disappointment. They said it's a one-sided statement, that Western Azerbaijan is simply a territorial claim on Armenia, that the statement ignores Armenian heritage being destroyed in Azerbaijan, and they didn't even say that Armenia is not destroying Islamic heritage. Please reflect a little bit for us on the performance of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and if they're doing their job.
Well, it's very sad for me to see this kind of very weak performance from the foreign ministry, but it's expectable because they are under commands not to act in a way that will anger either Turkey or Azerbaijan. And they are not doing what the people in the ministry can actually do by working with their partners in many countries and explaining the situation and not allowing this kind of wording to be put in the declaration, either in the OIC countries or in NAM. I have seen the same, and I think it's the same situation with the NAM countries, non-aligned movement countries, and Azerbaijan and Turkey are using their position right now and making advantage of the situation that there is no opposition from the Armenian side in any fora, I would say. There is not a single word being uttered in a way that will show our counterparts the real situation, the crimes Azerbaijan has committed and is committing on a daily basis, and actually working with many countries that are friendly to us that would not allow this kind of wording to get through. At least I wouldn't say they would stop this wording, but they would at least work to change it to something more neutral. But I don't think this is the case. And this is part of the situation when Turkey and Azerbaijan are trying to create some kind of a legal basis for their further actions by putting this kind of a wording in different resolutions or declarations of the organizations where Armenia is not a member or is not present. Even in some where Armenia is present under the command from the Prime Minister's office, they are not acting in accordance with what they could have acted to stop this kind of wording that has nothing to do. This is a false rhetoric that is being put into international organizations' legal documents. But for Azerbaijan and Turkey, this is part of their way of working, of trying to create some kind of a legal basis for further actions. And
but Armenia does have friends in the OIC. In the past, when you were in the MFA, you had worked with Indonesia, I think, or was it Malaysia?
Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and
to
I
stop
know Egypt and other countries in NAM, India, and many other countries in NAM. They don't want to be manipulated by either Turkey or Azerbaijan into some kind of a wording that is actually fabricated and has nothing to do with real historic facts. But for that, you have to work with them. You have to present the situation. You have to bring your argumentation and historic facts and show that they are simply falsifying it and manipulating with their the current situation of actually Armenia being non-existent as a member, as a party, as an opposition, simply stamping whatever agreements the Prime Minister has come to with his vis-a-vis in Azerbaijan or Turkey. in the past, we have stopped this kind of wording, or we have asked them to change it into something more neutral, something that will be in line with the norms and principles of international law, that will not be hurting Armenia's interests, or at least a perspective for peace. But currently, you have seen the foreign ministry even didn't want to make a statement. It was just a criticism in the country that forced them to come out and say something, but that something was so much veiled with a kind of a praying or asking for agreement to sign that stupid document called peace agreement or whatever, that you are more ashamed of the articulations that come out from the foreign ministry than if they had kept silence.
OIC works by consensus, and it was just surprising to see that even a country like Iran supported the statement which actually referenced Western Azerbaijan, which is a province of Iran, but also it's a ideology that is meant to cut off Iran from the north-south communication axis. So yeah, it's unfathomable to me how this would not be stopped by Iran had Armenia requested. So I wanted to ask you, I mean, this is by far the worst. OIC has always been manipulated by Turkey and Azerbaijan, but this has been by far the worst OIC declaration that I've seen. But I wanted to ask you, do you think this was the price basically that Pashinyan was asked to pay for being allowed to visit the Sultan in Istanbul and had that photo up? I mean, what was, in your opinion, what do you think?
No, I think they would have put that wording no matter what, because as I said, it's part of the way of action. We have seen that in the previous years as well. And if there is no resistance from Armenia, why would these countries try to support Armenians or fight for Armenia's interests unless you give them the reasoning why they should do that? It's just some kind of wording, and I don't think many of the OIC countries give high reference to these declarations. It's just a kind of a formality that they put there, but the result might be devastating if you don't stop that from going into other fora, because that wording might be referenced in the UN documents, in other documents, and that's where you have to be very careful that if you don't stop it in the OIC, at least you stop them from getting into this document. And I think that's one of the reasons that Iran did not, at least maybe they were against it, but they did not break the consensus, because that would have meant working against Turkey and many Arab countries right now, which, given the situation, Iran cannot afford, and it does not want to break the kind of a more or less alliance that has been created in the Middle East, not to allow the situation to fall into the chaos. So this is something that we have to look into a bigger perspective. But the worst part in this whole thing is that the Armenian foreign ministry, that is supposed to fight for the interests of the Republic of Armenia, did actually nothing to stop this wording or to change it into something more acceptable or in line with international law requirements. So this is something that we have to keep in mind, and this is just, we have seen that in the workings and in the stance of the current government and its head.
All right. Thank you. Let's wrap up our topics here and find out if we have things on our minds that we would like to share with the audience. Ambassador Aghajanian, something you'd like to share?
Well, for me, it was very sad and tragic to see the attack on the Holy Etchmiadzin, and the fans being dragged by the security service people on one side, and the people not allowing them to enter the territory of the church. And I remember a lady that started crying when the decision came out about the arrest of Archbishop Mikhail Aghajanian. It shows really the tense situation that is in the public, and how painful it is for many people to see that your values as people, as Armenian, are being stepped over, broken, violated on the daily basis. And for many people, they feel helpless. But I think meantime, you see others that are joining the camp of fighters, and people that maybe 2-3 years ago would say, okay, maybe they're right. Okay, let's give them time. Okay, they don't know what they are doing. Okay, they are not that skilled or professional. Now, almost maybe 9.5 out of 10 people are stating that they are following enemy's plan, and they are not working for either Armenia or for Armenian people. And that's I think was very vividly depicted in this attack against Etchmiadzin, and the people defending it as if it was the last barrier that they had to defend and not allow it to fall.
Hovik, what's on your mind?
Yeah, it is regrettable that now, I mean, it seems like, Pashinyan is going to going through dismantling Armenia's institutions. But I have to say, a new poll was released last week by MPG, which basically measured like this Pashinyan attack against the church. And the good news, if it can be called as such, is that nearly 80% of the people were against this. So this is a deeply unpopular move in Armenia. 57.9%, according to this poll, were completely against Pashinyan's attacks against the church, and 19.2 were somewhat against. So combined, it's like 80%. And I mean, this will degrade Pashinyan's popularity even more. And I'm hoping that this finally is the spark that lights up the dry tinder that is Armenia post 2020, because in reality, it has gone beyond acceptable. I mean, every single piece of institution identity that Armenians hold near and dear is being destroyed systematically. And if this is a call for regime change, then I hope it's successful. I know a lot of people are being arrested in Armenia for even saying things like this, but I do hope that finally people come to their senses and rise up.
All right. We're going to leave it there for today. Thank you, Ambassador Aghajanian, for joining us and sharing your insight.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. Okay, that was our weekend review, recorded on June 30th, 2025. We've been talking with Ms. Dziunik Aghajanian, who has served Armenia through the ranks of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and most recently as a diplomat, as Armenia's ambassador to such countries as the Netherlands, Malaysia, and Indonesia. So she knows what she's talking about when she says she knows what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs can do in those countries and working with Islamic countries. She received her education at Yerevan State University, Columbia University in New York, and Uppsala University in Sweden.
All right, folks. Well, thank you very much. Just one last request, the usual. Make sure to subscribe to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Let's keep growing that platform. We are doing good, but not as good as we want. So let's just help us amplify that platform.
Yeah, give us a review. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be bad. It can be just a few words long, and it'll add to the fact that people are listening and responding to our Apple Podcasts. The links are going to be in our show notes, but you can go to our Linktree links, and the Apple Podcasts and Spotify links are available there. As for the show notes for this episode, podcasts.groong.org/episode number, and you can always help us by giving to Groong and supporting us financially if you like. Podcasts.groong.org/donate. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.